spare no expense. I've got the whole like collection going on back here. We've got some, we've got one from United. We've got the United, or the This Is Fine dog. We've got the GitHub octopi, and we've got some rubric plushies as well. I have quite the collection. Let's see, where. All right, so are we pretty much ready to roll?
Yeah, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
It's all yours.
Oh, sweet, awesome. So thank you to, oh, do not end my slideshow. Thank you to everybody who has shown up. You know, this is day 2 of the VMware Code Connect conference that I am very excited to be a part of. This was always one of those hopes and dreams, like from the first time that I started working at VMware way back when, that I hope that we could make kind of like a code-based, automation-focused type conference that was dedicated to just that. So huge shout out to Kripa, Eric, and the entire VMware Code team for being able to pull this off. Fantastic, very, very exciting. So a little bit about me, you know, the person that that is talking at you right now, which I'll be hoping to change here shortly. My name is Kyle Ruddy. I do not work for VMware anymore. I do now work for another company, but the purpose of why I'm here is because I really enjoy sharing things with the community, doing a lot of things to show off anything that I've learned, so that other people can kind of, you know, skill up and you know, be better in the automation scheme, at least as much as far as I've been able to make it myself. So definitely check out stuff like my blog, my GitHub repo, check out the V Brown Bag podcast. I know Chris Williams is one of the attendees, so he'll keep me honest here when I say I am literally an occasional host, you know, keyword there, occasional. I do that every now and then. I've probably actually presented here more times than I have hosted anymore. But then Twitter is probably the easiest way to reach me outside of this session, which, you know, obviously we'll be having some discussions therein. So the Q&A is live. So if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have things of that nature, please feel free to drop some things into the Q&A. I do want to go over some exciting things that have been happening here recently in the world of PowerShell and Power CLI, mainly Power CLI. So I'm going to switch from our slide view here and move over into a different screen. So excuse me while I shift here for 1 second. Here we go. Hopefully we can see my Chrome browser here. So let's go out to GitHub, except I don't want to go to there. I want to go out to to the Power CLI. Well, looks like I will kill that. So let's go out to our Power CLI repository, and let's check out something that was new that was added out here as a pull request. Because one of the biggest requests, like when I was doing a lot of Power CLI work, was around some of the things that might be missing from Power CLI. And one of the big things was around, you know, one, vSphere replication. Thankfully, William was able to field a lot of the questions around vSphere replication and some of the dealings with that, because it's a private API. It deals with a different group than who the Power CLI group is. But the other one is SSO. Like, this is one of those things that has been requested, you know, impressively so. And here within the last couple days, there's a new module that's out there, and part of our Power CLI example scripts. This is a public repository that's out there under the VMware organization. And this new module allows us to now start being able to use commandlets, use automation against SSO. One of the really cool things that I found out was that it also works against, this isn't just like a 7.0 thing. This is a lot more than that. So I've kind of started to begin playing with it because there's a lot of stuff here. So this is also one of the first things that I've seen, that some of the PowerCLI engineering team has been able to release as an open source project. So that means, like, if you see something out here that you don't like how it works, make a comment, fix it yourself, and submit a pull request into it, or you can just start consuming it directly from the repository itself. So what I've done is I've already downloaded this. I've made it available on my local system. So let's jump over to a PowerShell session here. So let's do ooh, that is not going to work. Let me switch to a different terminal session here. Hopefully everybody is okay if I stay in the darker mode, since my my ZSH terminal seems to want to give me fairly unreadable text. So let's do a get module. Let's first make sure that this thing is downloaded and exists. It is VMware.vsphere SSO something. So we can see that I've already downloaded it. I've already put it out because I'm running on a Macintosh system. This is running in my local user directory, local share, PowerShell, and modules. So I've already made it available there. Then we can do.
Oh, Kyle, they're not seeing your terminal.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Good point. Let's switch to my desktop. There we go. How about now?
Looks good.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke, for calling that out. So back here, entering into PowerShell. This is on a Macintosh system. Just, so already this module supports PowerShell Core, or technically I'm in PowerShell 7, so they no longer call it PowerShell Core. It's now PowerShell 7, and prior versions 5.1 and older are the Windows PowerShell version. So keep that in mind. But so we can see that that our module is there. Let's do a command module. So here's an output of the commandlets that are included in this. Let's just go full screen. So I'm not going to do too much work with this because this is still new to me as well. But there's a couple things that we want to kind of examine as we go through here. We want to take a look at some of the names, some of the functions or commandlets that are available. We can see quite a few bits of functionality when it comes to groups, some of the policies that are associated with lockout and policy or password policies. Lockout's always one of the big ones that always caught me up, because when I'm setting up lab environments, I almost never change that from the standard lockout time. So I'm glad I can now automate that to update that. Then we have some more interesting things that I'm sure the PowerCLI engineering team would love some feedback on, such as new person user. I'll let you try and figure out what that means, decipher what that means. But that's some things that that pull request out there in GitHub would like to probably have some feedback on. And then we can see some of the others, like doing sets. And then we can also go a little crazy and do an add active directory identity source. So there's some really exciting commandlets and functionalities that have been provided out there as part of this module. Now, the one thing that you probably are also noticing here is that we have a connect and disconnect. So that means that this is making that connection separately from what like your standard Connect VI server is going to do. That means that it's connecting to a different API service that the standard Connect VI server or Connect CIS server or those types are connecting to and you know, operating through. So one of the things that I've also found out through this process is when you do the Connect SSO admin server, let me type in my my local system here. So it's going to prompt you for a username and then password. Now this is an issue. Like this is something that I've already commented on the GitHub repository. Kind of don't want to see my password in plain text. So you know, keep in mind this is a community supported and focused release. So let me hide this for just 1 second so I can set up my connection. Yes, good call out, Luke. Sharing is indeed caring. Let me hide that. Yeah, so we can see there's another one of the PowerCLI engineers has made a couple comments, such as, you know, some binary issues, maybe even some phrasings, correcting those. And then I've dropped a couple updates here in the bottom as well, where, you know, that password issue probably isn't what we want to see, as well as some exceptions that I'll be able to show you, assuming that it lets me connect. It seems to be very unhappy with me right now. Domain, local OS. Sorry, trying to authenticate here. And the thing is not happy, so we might not be doing too many demos of this one. So let me quit out of that, bring it back. Feel free to drop any questions or comments or anything like that in as we go. There's definitely going to be time for some open discussion. I'll see if we can't unmute some folks to have some better dialogue, because I know we've got some great community folks out there. Yep. Yeah, this, for whatever reason, this is totally bombing out on me right now. That is unfortunate. Okay, so you know, I would say try this out in your own environments. Hopefully it actually will connect. I had it up and functional earlier this morning. Joys of live demos. One of the questions that have come in is around VRO, and I will be completely honest, have not done a lot with VRO. My big focus around VRO was essentially always PowerShell support. And up until here recently, PowerShell support has been fairly bad. You know, you had to set up that PowerShell proxy host. You had to kind of have VRO interact with the proxy host and, you know, send information in between. It basically became a better use of time to learn JavaScript, to kind of understand the nuances there in order to be able to create things that could run natively in VRO. However, that is something that has changed over the past months, I believe. So, so you might want to check that out a little more here. One of the things that I always enjoyed using was one of the flings called Power Actions, which, let's bring up the Flings website here. because this is something that's built into the vSphere HTML5 Flings site. So for those of you who don't know, or are on older versions of vSphere, the folks at VMware have pretty much, since the first days of the discussion about HTML5, they've created this Fling that basically is a proxy that you can sit out there, that you can connect through, and it kind of works like a almost man-in-the-middle type deal, proxying your commands or your clicks or your workflows, sends it back into the standard vSphere client. This was something that was updated as of like 6.7, and it pretty much has now become the de facto, the standard anymore. However, one of the things they've done to keep the HTML web client Fling alive is adding some new things, such as like the Developer Center, adding in a API Explorer, being able to do code capture, being able to do Power Actions. So one of the things that I can do is, I'm a huge fan of using the VMware Flings for demo environments, or even testing environments, because not everybody has a testing environment. The joke is always that some people are, not everybody has a testing environment, and sometimes you're even lucky enough to have one that isn't production. So here is just labs.hol.vmware.com, and it has a very simplistic vSphere configuration. Have a couple hosts, have a couple application server, core system that's turned off, a couple KMSs. It looks like this has been updated since the last time I touched it. But then, if you're using the Fling and you're not up to date as of 6.7, or even as of this with 7.0, you'll start seeing this Developer Center area that gets you into some of those other functionality areas, like the API Explorer, like code capture, which, if you have no idea what code capture is, maybe you've heard of the prior Fling called Onyx. That was a way for you to kind of record what you're doing within the web UI and then output it as code. So we can get a little crazy and do like say, start recording here. We can go back to our VM view, we can power on our system there. We can take our template over here and actually turn it into a template. And then all the while, this little red box is blinking and saying, hey, by the way, this is recording. And we go back, and it'll tell us, like, here's what we can do to replicate that power on VM task. And then same thing down here. This is how we can, sorry, different keys, because it's, yeah. Oh, it really is unhappy about that view. All right, so hopefully you can read this. It's not gonna let me get too much larger without really messing up our view here. But so we can see that right here, this is the process of marking a virtual machine as a template. We can see that it's using get view. So these are all direct API calls from the back end. Kind of the other fun thing that's been built into it here as of lately, you can do stuff like Python. So you can see that it's importing the Vim library from PyVMami and performing that same power on multi-VM task. And then the same thing down here, that it's performing that same mark as template method through the API. And this is the same thing for VRO, for JavaScript, same thing for Go and Go Vmami, as we can see there. So let's see some more questions here. Here's one from Justin. When you are writing scripts, do you have a directory structure or file structure that you typically follow? How do you get started? For scripts, it really depends. It depends on what the end result I would like it to be. You know, when you think about the progression of your automation workflows, you know, at first you kind of start off with bits of code, you know, snippets essentially, where you're running it against an active system, just trying to figure out what it's going to do. Perfect example is doing something like that against a hands-on lab environment. You know, at that point, we're running, you know, one-liners or, you know, something with a little bit of logic. So, but that's, you know, for the most part, if that's something that I have to do once or twice, not a big deal. Anything more than that, I'm probably going to turn it into a script. And that kind of starts down this life cycle pattern of what it needs to be in the end. So, you know, at a script, you know, something that's fairly static, you know, you're always going to be doing generally that same thing over and over and over again. So, you know, something like a stuck task, or, you know, if you have to, you know, spin up a bunch of virtual machines on a scheduled task, something like that, that's, you know, going to be fairly static, that, you know, you can also hand that out. Those are all going to be generally, you know, I basically just stick it in a scripts folder. You know, if you've ever looked at my GitHub, you know, I've got PowerShell, I've got PowerCLI. Those are basically scripts that are all there, and you know, work directly within the areas that they're designed for. But generally, that's always not been the case of where my scripting or my automation patterns end. A lot of times, what I'm doing with those scripts is going to be reused by somebody, and it's a whole lot easier for other people to reuse those scripts or automation workflows by turning them into a module, or even just you know, a function. You know, so instead of somebody having to know and being able to point their PowerShell terminal at, you know, a specific directory, a specific script, they can import that script, and then they can do, you know, have a very like get VM type feel to it, and then you turn it into a module that you know, then you can just have it import automatically based on usage. Now, for each one of these, your directory structure kind of changes. You know, scripts can all live in one single you know, folder. They don't really have to be spread out. However, modules, on the other hand, kind of do. You know, you do kind of have a folder structure for those. You have you know, the function script or file itself. Then you have your declaration of what that what that module does. Then you can get even kind of crazier. Way back when I was working with NSXV a lot, and stuff like Power NSX didn't exist, I had created a NSXV PowerShell module that worked against the NSXV APIs. And so, you know, you had to, I had to, you know, really do a lot of hands-on work, massaging the data that was not only being submitted, but being retrieved back from the NSX API. So, you know, you can even start getting into messing around with an XML file to control that kind of data and how it's positioned and aligned as part of the response. So, you know, modules are, you know, I'm probably getting way beyond the point of the question here, but it really depends on what you want your end result to be. Can we set up update manager group baselines with PowerCLI yet? Not that I know of. That's something that is there's an API limitation for that. So it, you know, that's going to be one of those things that use the PowerCLI features website. For those of you who haven't heard or seen that before, you know, this is a publicly available feature request site that you can go out to and tell the PMs and the engineering teams that are really taking a look at this site what you want. And so I'm pretty certain that already exists out here. Baseline group support looks like, you know, it's been out there for a while, since 2017. It has 56 different votes. So, you know, if Scott, if you haven't already upvoted this, I would head out there and upvote it. If you can, you know, kind of go through and try to add in some context for what exactly you're trying to do. You know, some of these things are, are, when you're the user, when you're consuming this and you're creating those baseline groups and doing those modifications, it makes sense to you. But sometimes on the product side and to the engineers, they're not familiar with exactly some of the intricate workflows that people are trying to achieve or trying to manage their environments with. So if you can add some of that context or some of that information, that would be fantastic. I know. Yeah, there was one of these that actually went through and basically worked backwards on one of the API calls. Because I think VRO might have support for baselines already, and somebody actually went through and worked it backwards, and it was totally unsupported. Like, you will never get support for it if you open up a ticket or anything like that. They're gonna be very quick to be like, hey, you need some SDK support for this. But if you can make it work, then and you're happy with supporting it, that's awesome. Let's see, we have a question from Luke that is around, I'm assuming that we're talking about Power Actions and whether or not that's still actively supported, and that you can't use Power Actions in vSphere 7. Last I knew, well, so have to be careful. So the word support comes with that's a larger concept when we say support. So because it's a fling, it's not technically supported. And I know you know that, but I want to make that very clear when I'm talking about support. I believe that Luke is talking about active development and whether or not Power Actions is something that's still undergoing work and what's happening there. Last I knew, that was still a work in progress. That was something that was being targeted as something to be included in the vSphere product itself, kind of like the life cycle that happened with the Developer Center, Code Capture, and the API Explorer, kind of going from being a feature of the fling to then being built into the product, as we can kind of show. As I showed in the hands-on lab there, it's not just a fling thing anymore, it's actually included in the product and available. Now, whether or not that's still being developed, I don't know, to be extremely candidly honest. I would hope so. I think there's a lot of power, there's a lot of accessibility behind Power Actions and being able to create certain workflows. So I don't know if I actually covered what the whole Onyx fling was before. I think I kind of mentioned it and then moved on. But since Luke kind of brought it up here, I want to go through it and give a little bit of context about what we're talking about there, or rather what I'm talking about there. So the end result of what Power Actions can do is to basically give you the ability to right-click on an object and built into the context of that object, you would be able to see a Power Actions kind of little breakout arrow, and then you would be able to get to the point where you could run a task or a workflow or something along those lines. Somebody was talking about VRO earlier. Very similar to that. If you've used VRO and had that integrated into your vSphere client, similar capabilities. If you put like a workflow or a process into VRO, it shows up in the vSphere area, kind of like this. We can assign a tag, except with Power Actions, you can build out a long-running task or an entire workflow. One of the examples that I get a lot about that is people who are wanting the ability to take our app 01B right here. If you do this in the UI, or even if you do it in PowerCLI, it's at least 2 commands or a couple different clicks, because first you have to power off that system, then you have to delete it. The end goal here, power down, remove that system in a streamlined fashion. It's something that a lot of people have asked for. Personally, from my standpoint, that's extremely dangerous to put in a one-click feature. So I kind of want people to have that behind some sort of permissions level, or have some sort of understanding that you're walking through a process in order to accomplish that task. Because if you do like power off, it's going to prompt you and say, hey, are you sure you want to do this? But so with Power Actions, you can build that into that workflow, assign it to a virtual machine object, and then for every single virtual machine, that workflow will show up. So you can just right-click Power Actions, whatever you've named that workflow, and it'll run through that entire process. This is really great for those use cases where perhaps an end user or a VI admin isn't comfortable with automation, isn't comfortable with PowerCLI or your language of choice. They can now go through the UI and still have at least some advantages from that automated workflow in order to speed up their process instead of right click, power off, wait, right click, delete permanently. That takes a long time, especially if you have to do that at scale. The next question that's come up, are we aware of any effort towards a new NSX module that resembles the classic vSphere commandlet style? Power NSX supports NSX-V and is not official, and NSX-T PowerCLI module commandlets are very low level. So what we're talking about here, which appreciate the call out there, is PowerCLI has several different types of modules that are associated with it. Some are low level, some are high level. Rather, I should say the commandlets that come in as part of that. Luke Deegans and myself did a PowerCLI deep dive a couple years ago where we actually talked about some of the intricacies therein. But basically what it comes down to is low level is going to be your direct API access, things like get view, which our code capture environment was returning. Whereas our high level stuff is going to be like get VM, shut down VM guest, delete VM, or rather remove VM. Those are going to be your high level things. Those are those things that are working, consuming that backend API and doing that in an automated fashion for you so that you don't have to worry about those API services in themselves. So with regards to what's happening with NSX, I'll also throw out the caveat there that Power NSX is a community supported module. Shout out to Nick and Berkey, who did a lot of work on that. Really made that a thing. But then when it came to NSX-T, that was something that VMware took on and created that low-level NSX-T module that was available. But at that point, it was essentially the same thing as get view the entire time, working through the NSX API. And if you've worked with the NSX API, not really a great experience. Not really meant for that. So one of the things that the PowerCLI team has done, and this is back a little over a year at this point, was they worked at trying to set up, or rather, take a look at creating some of those high-level functions. And if you've noticed some of the ways and some of the movements that that VMware and vSphere in particular have kind of moved, over to this, REST-focused, automated or automatically generated based resources. This was kind of one of the first instances of trying to do that for PowerCLI. So your mileage may vary as far as usability. When this was released, I believe it was only looking at doing the get commands, so it wasn't doing anything as far as sets or news or removes, but it could do the gets. So one of the examples here was around getting a firewall rule that existed, kind of walking through that process. But part of the issue is what was happening there is that they were looking for feedback. This was another case where the community could really chime in and tell them exactly what they were looking for, specifically around some of those use cases and other things along those lines, because maybe get firewall rule doesn't, maybe that's not a great thing to have automated within your environment, but that was one of the things that that could have been automatically generated fairly fast. So this was kind of the first look at doing that, trying to build that out. Now, based on the question, I'm assuming that that there really hasn't been too many changes to that NSX module since it's been released, except for updated support for some of those newer APIs services that have been released. So as far as what they're going to do with it, I'm not sure. I would love to see the Fling get updated. I would love to see some additional things get built. I believe one of the things that William was showing off yesterday in his session was that there are a couple of the high-level commandlets, or rather I should say functions, are available. Let me see, I wonder if they're still in our community repository here. So we have 2 there, and then we have so we have one NSXT that was contributed a while ago, and then we have the one that's a little more VMC focused, or VMware Cloud on AWS focused, but that one seems to still be receiving some update and some support here. And going back to Justin's original question, when I was talking about the modules, you can kind of see how the community repository is set up directory-wise. This may or may not be the fault of mine. So if you have problems with the way that it's configured, I did my best. I'm sorry. I know sending some of these modules into the PowerShell gallery is difficult, or rather kind of impossible. But this was kind of before that was really a thing. Hindsight would make some changes, but we have our PSM file, which is essentially like a PS1. Shout out to some of our contributors for taking time to build in some of these automated tasks and contribute those back. But that's not the one that I wanted. PSD, because I think we had, yeah, here we go. So here's kind of the definition for that module itself, so we can see exactly what functions were built into that PSM1 file. So we can see some of the things. You might have some work to make this work with a standalone NSXT environment that isn't connected to VMware Cloud on AWS, but that's another thing. That is the nicety around PowerCLI and some of these public APIs and PowerShell for being so easy to write and consume, is that you can create them yourselves and share them and consume. Let's see, so I think that's it for.
Hey Kyle, so we've got a few hands raised.
We have hands raised. Let's open up the mute and.
Yes, I'm gonna bring on John. John, feel free to unmute whenever you're ready to ask your question. John, are you there? Ah, misclick.
I may have talked too long.
John Blackmore, that's you that we unmuted.
Yeah, I just misclicked there. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay.
Eugene, I think, also had his hand up. Was that a misclick, or did you also want to ask a question? Also misclick. Cool. Well, I guess you're good for questions now. Kyle, does anyone have anything else they want to ask?
I'm also randomly going through and allowing different folks to talk, so
Gotcha.
Turn it into more of a group discussion style, because this is probably one of the more quiet or silent PowerCLI or PowerShell based groups that I've seen in a while. Who else do we have? Oh my, I'm definitely keeping Chris Williams on mute.
I was going to read out that comment to you. I was hoping you were reading that.
So one of the other things that I was going to go through and do is, so Luke had a really great session this morning on taking a look at the using the API, and Luke had a great workflow that kind of laid out like at what point and what period do you want to start look at using the API, and shout out to Luke for that one. That's a fantastic graphic, because that's always one of those things that people come up with questions and they're like, so when it comes to PowerCLI, we have these types of objects, we have that type of objects. Do we want to use the commandlets? Do we want to use the API? Because we've heard that the API might be faster. And one of the things is that a lot of the work to the commandlets over the past years have gotten faster and faster, so that really that need or that requirement to go through and put in the effort to use the API isn't necessarily a requirement. There's a lot of times where you don't have to. It just adds complexity. Though, if you're in extremely large environments, sometimes it gets a little crazy. So for Dion and the question of should I just jump into the API, personally, my own standpoint, no. Because it's a little harder to understand. It's a little harder to. Oh, Luke just shared his. Yeah, there we go. Nope, that is not what I wanted. Yeah, so personally, like even when I was using PowerCLI on a daily basis, and I still am using it on a frequent basis, but maybe not daily these days. Using and trying to interact with the API was not something that I would call is easy or simple. So it's a whole lot easier to remember get VM than it is to remember get view, view type, virtual machine, then trying to remember out your filter calls or remembering to call out which specific properties that you need to return back. Because one of the things is that when it comes to the difference in especially get VM versus get view, view type virtual machine, is that occasionally you can get to the point where actually using the API is slower, because the API is going to return back every single piece of information about that particular object. Yes, stop trying to cancel out of my HOL session. So let's come back here. Let me try and show you what I mean here. I'm going to go ahead and not use my home lab environment so I don't mess that up. Oops, no, I hit cancel and not okay. This is why I type and I do automation and I don't click. So connect VI server, I believe it's just VCSA. What is it, corp.local? Nope. What is it? Oh, that's right. We're in a multi vCenter environment here. Thank you, Chrome, for giving me the entire HTTP string. So in this case, get VM, gets us a smaller amount of the data that than what's available. A virtual machine object, if you've gone through it and looked at it, even just creating one steps through, this entire long process, because you have to set up like your all your PCI devices, your disks, your network adapters, CPU, RAM, all kinds of crazy stuff. Whereas PowerCLI kind of, especially with the high level, kind of condenses that down and gives you just the information that you probably need in a majority of the situations. Whereas if we do get view, view type, virtual machine, it's going to give us a lot of stuff on the screen that, probably don't want. Some stuff is cool, like tells us about any snapshots that might be there, gives us information that we can, dive a little deeper into the guest. If we look at our data store, we don't know what that data store is. That's a data store ID, so it's not really helpful for what we're trying to do here. And it's going to do this for every single one of these virtual machine objects. So this space right here is the difference between one object and moving on to the next object, since there are 3 of them in there. So that's one of the nice things. However, when you're using the high level commandlet, you can still get to that information. Nope. So we'll just pick out one at random here. And then we'll do another select. I think this needs to be an expand. So this is basically just calling out the extension data, which is part and being presented through that high level command. And this, as you can see, looks absolutely familiar to what we were seeing before through get view and the get view type. So you still, when you're using that get VM, you still have access to everything that's available through the API layer. So at that point, it kind of comes down to what your call is, what you are most familiar with. Now, one of the questions that came up was around some of the performance considerations and some tips and kind of caveats to provide. One of the things that I kind of geek out on is around performance tuning. A couple of years ago when we were doing one of the deep dives, you're getting your scripts, getting your code to work, that's victory. And that's like 80% of the battle. And the rest of it is kind of just for, to toot your own horn, as it were, to show off. However, that 20%, you can have some fun with it. So like, what happens if we wanted to go back up and we want to create a report? And maybe that report is for an environment that has a whole lot more than just 3 VMs in it. Maybe it has 3,000 VMs. If we need different pieces of information, it could take a while to run that report. Think of like something like a vcheck or anything along those lines. That could take a while because it's pulling back all of this information. Like, what if you don't need the declared alarm state? Like, what if that doesn't matter? Well, you can tell get view to ignore that information. So like, say in this case, we can do property and just do name. So in this case, it still gives us a little bit of information here, but it ignores everything else. So if you're in one of those situations where you're creating a report and you know exactly what you need, this is a way to kind of look at it and, definitely try it out in your own environment. First, measure command will be your friend here. So in this case, running this takes 33 milliseconds. If we do an equivalent, just doing get VM, helps if I can, there we go. it takes 15 milliseconds. So actually in this case, it's faster to continue using get VM if you just need some of those top level things. But let's go back to our API call through get view. This actually took longer. So this is now at 44 milliseconds. So we've gone from 15 with get VM, 33 with get view only calling out that name property. And then now we're at 44 if you get back all the information from the API about just 3 VMs. So, you can kind of multiply this across your environment, just depending on what you need. Let me see if there's, actually, what do we have in the questions? Yes, Luke calls out one of the things about code capture. Code capture is a wonderful utility. However, it does have some pain points. Like, my example there was extremely simplistic. Let's see if it's still there. Yeah, so just powering off a VM, like those are simple things that you can do through high-level commandlets. But so this kind of almost makes it a little more confusing. Maybe it might even be a detractor from folks who might not know enough about automation to continue forward, because you see this block of code and you're like, whoa, that's basically .NET C# style coding. We don't want to do that. Like that's not what they promised us PowerCLI would be. However, one of the nice things is that this can also tease out some of those things in Luke's PDF with the workflow to figure out things that might not have commandlets. So let's go back. Yeah, let's mess with our core 01 system here and do something that I don't think there's a commandlet for anymore. So let's change our hard disk to, let's change the SCSI port on this. Not something that I don't believe off the top of my head there's a commandlet to do that. We're doing some queries, doing a whole bunch of queries, and then here we have our Reconfigure Vm Task. I apologize for the folks who may or may not be able to see this because it gets crazy. So it's going through and it, basically what's happening here is that it's setting up an entirely new device and moving that existing disk to that new SCSI port. Let me find I believe this is our device unit number is the one that it's actually changing it to. So like this is something that would be extraordinarily complex to figure out if you were just using the API documentation, but it's very useful to do this through code capture because it gives you a lot, it basically gives you a head start on how to do this in a repeatable fashion. But yes, it is absolutely dangerous for those folks who may not understand already how this works or how it operates, or even if you're brand new, like it's going to be a little rough at first. Oh, Luke is saying that he's calling out the hard-coded MoRefs. So yeah, so like repeatability for this one, you're going to have to know that this little area right here, that's what controls the virtual machine itself. Let's see, NSXT and policy-based redirect, service chaining and insertion. Am I aware of any plans of adding this feature to a PowerShell module? None off the top of my head. That's not something that I've seen so far. If it's available in the API, in the public API for NSXT, there's a good chance that it could be done, it could be performed, it could be created and turned into that. Whether or not that's going to be a native commandlet or function, different story. Let's see, can you set the OVF environment? Enable it, set the IP allocation type, key values through the extension data. Thinking about creating custom OVAs programmatically. Anybody who's been unmuted have any comment about this? This is not something that I've generally done. A lot of my, when it comes to automation and especially with OVAs, templates, that sort of thing, I generally go through and use something like HashiCorp's Packer instead. Another area that you could try is using out OVF tool. That has a ton of capabilities that that may not be available natively. There was a question the other day. Oh, somebody unmuted. Scott?
I was just gonna say, I think I've seen the Vcenter VCSA, if you look in the ISO, where they have all those scripts that it's installing. I think they have some of that kind of program in there where it dumps it into the OVA. Or I should say out of the OVA into the, the attributes when it's setting up a new VM.
Kyle, we can't hear you if you're talking.
All right, off of mute. Okay, so moving on to one of the next comments there is around, will Luke's technique work with the NSXT API? Absolutely, it's going to work with basically anything, really. But when it comes to the NSXT API, or rather the NSXT module and that functionality, it's pretty much directly down into the bottom portion. And at that point, it's looking to see if there is a public API, using the API Explorer. NSXT has that built in, or you can use the VMware code site has the new version of the API Explorer. code.vmware.com. Then there's this little APIs area right here. And as of right now, it's taking you out to a brand new site that's called developer.vmware.com. And then there's our NSXT API over here. So you can start kind of digging through what APIs are available through that. Although this, it looks like they have not gotten to the point of converting this quite yet. Okay, policy API is in there. So a majority of what most folks are looking for are documented in here. So yes, you can continue to work through Luke's area right here, except for some of the things that may or may not work depending upon which area is our get view / extension data area. If there's no high level commandlet available for it, you're not going to have extension data. So you're going to go directly to get view. Let's see, PowerCLI does a lot behind the scenes as it interacts with the APIs, SOAP and REST. It's just like you would not want to browse through the mob to find a VM NIC. It's much easier to browse. Okay, I think that's more of just a comment because yeah, the high level commandlets are, as Justin's, I'll steal Justin's words here. It's doing a lot behind the scenes. There's a lot of validation, a lot of logic, a lot of building out, and you'll see that you can basically put into terms that it might be doing more than 1 or 2 different API calls at the same time, whereas your get view or working with those individual methods are going to be doing singular API calls at the same time. So API, the high-level commandlets abstract that from, basically your requirement to have to do it. So since the API call is over port 443 anyway, why doesn't Connect VI server just allow HTTPS in front of it anyways? So there is a way. I'll just go back to our hands-on lab here. So Connect VI server does have an alternative where you can tell it that. There it is. So you can specify a particular port. Let's see if I remember there we go, protocol. So you can tell it different things as well. HTTP does work if you configure it properly. That, for a while when VMware Cloud on AWS first came out, that was one of the examples, was to use the HTTPS string. And that was something that you could pull directly from the developer center itself. So it will work, just not something that it works by default. Yes, and as Justin calls out, there are several different ports that it uses in order to be able to interact with certain things. Like if you need to connect and do things to a host, maybe it's going to need port 902. If you're connecting to a like the Open VM console window, that's going to be something else. It's going to require a different port connectivity to it. However, the authentication happens at that top level, and generally you can do a majority of your tasks, but you will find out really quick what your firewall rules are by going through that. Let's see, what version must one run to get GoVMami and PyVMami code capture? Somebody's going to have to check me and verify, but I'm pretty certain that PyVMami and Python support was something that was added to 6.7 update 1. And then Go, I believe, was added to 7.0. However, this is one of those cases where if you don't have those versions, if you're not available to upgrade to those versions, use the Fling site. You can set it up. It's fairly easy. You just have to give it some credentials to connect back to it. And then you can have all of the latest and greatest features that are available in the Fling and use it just as you would like you're connected to your vCenter server natively through that client. Thank you for Justin for confirming 7.0 for Go support. Let's see. I've recently tried to deploy from content libraries but found it lacking and I was unable to do what I wanted. Any PowerCLI way to deploy a template from content library coming? Is this where I would use the API recording? Oof. So there's a lot of work that's been going on there. This is a long answer that I'll try and condense as much as possible. So long story short, historically, content library and tagging were one of the first services that were available as part of a REST-based service for the vCenter server. This was going back all the way to 6.0. We didn't really talk about any type of REST service on the vCenter server until 6.5 because, tags and content library was such a small surface area for people to use that maybe it wasn't a big deal at that time. So when it came to 6.5, things started kind of building, adding in new services, being the ability to do some different things. 6.7 improved that. 7.0 has further improved that beyond that. So one of the things that is being done right now, if I can find which, here we go. So going out to our API reference here, you'll start to see some different things available. So one of the areas here is there's a VM template service. So this allows you to work with some different resources that are part of that, including library items so that you can kind of interact that way. Then there is is it deployment? No, that one's for the vCenter server. Then there's VM. I think there is all of the top level stuff is missing. So let's switch over to our, oh, that's my lab environment. So let's go to our API Explorer here. Let's just search template. That's the other really nice thing is that the built-in Developer Center has search capabilities. That was not something that worked great in prior API Explorers. So that's our create. Oh no, here it is. Okay, I looked right past it. Let's go back to our template. It was our second post. Yeah, deploy library items. So this is going to be probably the newish way to be able to deploy things, templates through the content library using a REST service. This is something that you can absolutely go ahead and wrap around a PowerShell function, or you can use the get CIS server in order to start interacting with that. So there is work being done. That is something that that is looking to be improved upon. I do not see the PM that I was hoping to be here is not on the participant list as I see it, but I'm sure I will be sure to send him a copy of this recording to make sure that that is a known issue. But you know, yes, that is something that is being worked on, trying to make that better, because trying to use just the content library service itself is not great, to put it lightly. Let's see, did we miss any other questions? Or I see one hand that's up. I have no idea where it is in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I did have a question.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of scripts that spit out weekly HTML reports, kind of similar to VCheck, but it's becoming unwieldy once you start pulling in metrics from VROPs and vCenters and all that kind of stuff. And I was wondering if you've run across any built-in PowerShell way of kind of making a, I don't know, temporary database. I've tried using hash tables, but I seem to hit memory limits to that even.
So I know there is somebody on the call that I have set as the ability to talk that has done this. We'll see if Mr. Brian Wookner wants to chime in about some of his former automation work here. But it kind of depends on what you're most comfortable with. A lot of folks that I've talked to have gone out to different, you know, essentially feeding it into a database and trying to be able to interact with that information that way instead of trying to you know, manage that within PowerShell itself. So I guess it depends on one, do you have the flexibility to do that? Do you need, or do you want to have some of those historical requirements? Or is this just, you know, point in time and you're interacting with it right then and there to generate that HTML5 report?
Yeah, this is kind of longer term, just saving the HTML to a box type of thing, but just working through, you know, 3,000 VMs with all the metrics that we're trying to pull, you end up with probably 60,000 pieces of data that you're trying to dig through.
I'm trying to look up the last one that I used here. I may have to get back to you on it. The Google
And yeah,
View
maybe,
is failing me at the moment.
and yeah, maybe
But
at that point it's time to use ODBC.
that is an option as well. Any other questions or comments? I think we're kind of coming to the end here.
Did you get to answer that question about performance considerations and tips/caveats that
Yep.
you provide? Okay.
I mean, and if we needed to dig further into that, feel free to leave a comment on, what pieces we need in general. Because generally that comes down to, which service you want to use. Are you using API services and vSphere objects, or are you using .NET objects and the high-level commandlets? And then, you'll basically trying to isolate how many calls that you make, because you want to get all of that information, because it's going to run faster on your system than it is to try and compile or create all of those things on the server side. So was it last year? I think it was last year, for the PowerCLI deep dive, we kind of took a look at a process in order to kind of in general speed up tasks. Instead of doing a for each loop and picking out individual information, like grab all the VMs, toss it into, or rather do a for each. Sorry, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. The bad example was doing a for each through the VM list, picking out individual information. And then the proper way to do it was get the VM, the list of VMs, doing a get VM, putting it into an array or a collection, and then running your for each loop against that. Because once you have the information, it's a whole lot faster the process.
Yeah, I definitely found that out with tags. Just getting all the tags into a table and then trying to match the VMs with that instead of get VM, get tag.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if anybody's doing a lot of work with tags, the performance team, the vSphere performance team, has been doing a lot of research, doing a lot of digging, and thankfully providing a lot of feedback to the engineering side. And they've been doing a lot of work around tags to try and make that better. One of the big improvements was the ability to support bulk operations. So, there was one module, I only know this because I wrote a majority of it, that we were trying to do, because there are certain situations that are a lot faster as part of, here it is. There's certain areas that are faster when you do get tag, because it's using the not current SOAP service instead of the REST service. But there are certain situations where the REST service is faster. So one of the things that I did was go through and create this vmware.community.cis tag. CIS tagging is the, or rather CIS is the endpoint, tagging is the service, to kind of assist in making that process a little faster, more bearable. But the performance team has released a white paper. They've done a couple of blogs. So if you're big into tagging, check some of those things out. Let's see. We have a new question that just came up. With the move away from AD and IWA for Vcenter, do we have any ways to not have a user password prompt when connecting with PowerCLI? No. So basically, we're talking about token-based authentication. At this point in time, no. That is something that I believe was on our. Is it this one? Yeah, I might have already moved away from it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so there was an idea that was submitted around using tokens. I know there was some ideas passed around about how to do this natively with PowerCLI and also through some of the REST services, and that would then extend out to also the SDKs and things of that nature. But that's not something that I've seen, anything that's been released publicly or even in beta form. Oh yeah, sorry. One of the things I totally saw a squirrel and went right away from what Justin was mentioning about some of the different API services. Let's see, yeah, so here's no, that's not right. That's not the one that I want at all. Go higher. I don't think I can go higher than that, Justin. Yeah, we'll go back to the old version, to the built-in version. Yeah, so here's an example, kind of trying to give some context to the prior question about content library and the process behind that. So like content library has its own API service that's out there. It's consumable. You can do all sorts of things to interact with the content library. However, a lot of people have said that it's a little difficult to do. It's a little difficult to deploy things. Yeah, to be frank, there's some confusion there. The terms that are being used with regards to what a library item is, what the creation of a new item is that a new item within the content library? Is that a new item within the vSphere client itself? It gets a little foggy. So that's why you're starting to see some of the new aspects that are being added to the Vcenter REST API service itself. But if you need any specific pieces, any more granularity, there is the content library service itself. But the benefit, the addition, the upgrade is kind of looking into the looking at that vSphere sided service. That's new. I think that's new as of 6.7 update 1 might have been the first one, and then all the brand new stuff came as of 7.0, I believe. Okay, any other questions, comments? Q&A, okay, that one's been answered, that one's all set. Dangerously marking more people able to talk.
Live dangerously.
I mean, Justin, I figure if they're okay giving you a session, they're okay to let you talk.
That's the only way he lives.
So on the left there is the content. That's where I was trying to get you to go up to.
Okay.
So same information, just
Yeah.
one's inside the vCenter, one's on the web.
So on the, come on, go back one more. CIS tagging. Yeah, so some of these things, here's what I was talking about with some of the improvements to tagging, being able to attach a single tag to multiple objects, That's something that definitely speeds things up. If anybody's attached a tag to an object and then had to do it a couple hundred times, super, super long period of time to wait in order for that to go. That is definitely one of those situations where you set up your PowerShell window, you connect, and then you run your job. Then you just like move that console window off to the side and continue working elsewhere instead. Anything that anybody's doing that's fun here recently? Anybody coding some cool projects or creating some new modules? Something that that's worth talking about, sharing?
And if you raise your hand, I'll unmute you so that you can chat about it if you don't want to type it out.
And yes, that is the everything is fine dog. I do love me some stuffed animals and plushies. There's been I've got some ones from Rubric that are back there. I've got the GitHub Octocat. Have one from United because back before these times I was flying all the time.
So
yeah.
This is Michael Dunstan, and I've gone through and updated the in the PowerShell examples the backups for the Visa to work in 6.7. They originally just worked for 6.5, and then I went through and some of the other VSA commandlets in there and updated them for 6.7 also.
Nice. That's awesome. The big question, did you contribute them back?
If you go look, you should see them, yes.
Ooh, very nice. I like it. So the thing that we're talking about there are, there were some new with, I believe, 6.5 it was. There was the ability to create a file-based backup from the Vcenter server. This was something that was only available through the API or through, consuming an API service through Get CIS server, CIS server service. So I know Brian Graff created one of the first iterations of it. Oh yeah, 11 days ago. Look at that. Yeah, so we've got Brian's backup to file. Oh no, yep, modified. Very nice. Excellent. Yeah, so instead of having to do sorry, go ahead.
It had to be fixed is a lot of these were using beta functions. So I had to take out the beta part.
What? Brian Graff using beta functions? He would never. Oh, that's awesome that you found it. I'm assuming that you're using these functions.
Yeah, we have give or take 40 some vCenters, and so trying to code and manage, and so I was trying to find ways to be consistent in getting backups done, but also setting other settings like NTP, and make sure password weren't expired.
Nice. That's awesome. That was like one of the big improvements, at least in my mind, when it came to like 6.5. It was, not just the REST API service, but the ability to take file-based backups. Because like, at least in my home lab, like, I don't really have a ton of storage space. I've got, a small little vSAN data store, and I've got a Synology that I've got set up for NFS, and it has a ton of space, but it's extremely slow. So, if I have to go back and restore from a backup on that thing, it's gonna be a long process. That's like, set it up, run it, restore, and then just, you're done for the day. So file-based backups made that amazing, and the ability to set it up and do it automatically, fantastic.
I'd like to know more about what Scott was talking about earlier. What you know, the report thing he was trying to describe and solve?
Yeah, I originally we were just pulling like, you know, here's the average CPU memory, here's a bunch of tags that we have for different business things, and then spit it out into HTML so that, you know, business managers can view it, and we have a history, you know, week after week. But that's kind of expanded where it got too slow, so I've swapped a lot of the metrics now pulls from VROPs, which is, you know, that's great, especially since it already has a lot of the averages and stuff that you can pull. But just over time, you know, 7 vCenters, 3,000 VMs, we keep adding more data. It just gets slower and slower, and I'm spitting out all these, I don't know, probably 25, 30 different reports for different teams. It ends up running 6 to 8 hours, you know, each week. So always trying to improve that and speed things up. But yeah, switching the tags to its own hash table definitely helped a lot to just pull that and then query the hash table for what tags are on the VM. Helped.
Hi, Kyle.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a few points there kind of brought up similar issues there. I work in an extremely large environment with yeah, lots of vCenters and thousands of hosts, and performance is always a big issue. I'm just wondering, do you have a favorite choice of multi-threading that you implement in PowerShell to, say, query multiple vCenters at the same time and kind of pull all the information back? Or have you come across scenarios where you've had to implement solutions like that?
So it kind of depends. So back in my admin days, I had a fairly large environment as well, where, you know, we were globally distributed. We had, you know, probably at that point, I think we had minimal vCenter servers. We had like 8 vCenter servers, but, you know, globally all over the place. I think we were somewhere in the 20 to 25,000 virtual machines. A lot of what I was doing was starting different PowerShell jobs. So feeding in my session token into a job that was self-contained with all the information that it needed to run a particular job or task. However, one of the things that Justin brought up is there's been a lot of changes in the technology that you can do since, you know, back then, which I hesitate to even call 5 years ago back then, but at the pace that technology is moving, it's crazy. But you can now get to the point of using like Docker containers to, you know, have a PowerShell instance that's running as part of that Docker container, tell it to reach out and talk to this individual PowerShell script, and then just like the Docker container runs, does its job, reports back, kills itself. Then, you know, you just let that roll. You know, you can run several different Docker containers for every single instance or vCenter server, or you can get really crazy and do it for every single job that you need done. You just need a way to kind of understand the way that information is being returned back to you, so that you can consume it properly and, you know, format it in, you know, whatever way you need, assuming that you even need data back. You know.
Yeah, definitely. It's lots of data coming back. So it's about 20,000 hosts to query, and sometimes when you're pulling that much information back, you know, some of our pulls can take 24 hours. And you know, if you're using ESX CLI, it can be a pain when you're kind of pulling that kind of information deep down in the hypervisor. So I'm thinking about ways on how to, you know, perform it better. There's about 3 or 4 different ways that I know to multi-threading PowerShell, but to be honest, I tend to go with the first one I get working, because there's a bit of a, you know, messing around to getting multi-threading working in the first place, and then aggregating the data back when you return it from each of the threads, and get a lot of failures from threads getting stuck and hung, and it's a real pain point for us.
So other than for compliance reasons, is a report that takes 24 hours to generate actually useful?
Yeah, I suppose it's, yeah, I mean, for a simple instance of this might be like, you know, if you've got several 100,000 VMs and you need an accurate way of identifying where each VM sits, so we would have a web front end which would document where every VM is, so the SA teams can find it if they need to, or where clusters are located, what vCenter they're under, and things like that. So yeah, it's how we keep our inventory. It might be 24 hours, before it's updated each time, but it's, VMs don't, it's pretty accurate,
Okay.
And then one last thing is, as folks are starting to drop off, because I think we're at time, Sophie did drop a link to some feedback forms. So please, fill that out. Let not only myself, but also the VMware code organizers know how this session went. I think we probably could have gone for a while longer, especially once we get on to the topic of performance in general. But so, please check that out. And thank you to all the attendees for coming, and again for Sophie, Kripa, and crew for setting this up and supporting it. This has been amazing.
Thank you, Kyle, and thanks everyone for being so talkative and participatory. It's been great listening in. So I'll let everyone go. The next session started a few minutes ago, so if you're going, feel free to hop off.
Thanks, everyone.
Good job, Kyle.